worth the bother. So says Pierre Anton. When he decides that there is no meaning to life, leaves the classroom, climbs a plum tree, and stays there. His friends and classmates cannot get him to come down, not even by pelting him with rocks. So to prove to him that there is meaning to life, they set out to build a heap of meaning in an abandoned sawmill. But it soon becomes obvious that each person cannot give up what is most meaningful, so they begin to decide for one another what the other must give up. The pile is started with a lifetime's collection of Dungeons and Dragons books, a fishing rod, a pair of green sandals, a pet hamster. But then, as each demand becomes more extreme, things start taking a very morbid twist, and the kids become ever more desperate to get Pierre Anton down. Chapter 10. It's too hot to wear this. Oh my god. So uncomfortable. How could I make it comfier for you? Any questions, anybody? The last kid that went picked, what's her name? Okay, last time Elise was chosen to give up to the pile of meaning her baby brother, who died 6 months ago. He was only 2. And then they pulled cards. They pulled cards to, like, find out who was gonna go to the graveyard in the dead of night to dig up the body and bring it to put it on the pile of meaning to get Pierre Anton down from the plum tree. And Agnes, our narrator, has a lot of playing cards. She likes to play cards in her fun spare time. So she brought a very special deck of gold gilted black playing cards that had never been opened, but she tried to cheat by scratching the gilt off of all of the deuces, and it was lowest card. The highest cards have to do the dirty deed. So she tried to cheat, but then they did it in a way that her plan didn't work. They shuffled the deck, and then everybody had to choose from the top to prevent cheating. And now she's one of the people who has to go dig up Elise's little brother's grave. And that's where we are. I'd set my alarm to go off at 10:30, but I needn't have bothered. I never managed to fall asleep. Just lay in bed with my eyes open for more than an hour and a half before it was time to get up. At exactly 10:25, I climbed out of bed turned off the alarm, and put on my jeans and a sweater. I stuck my feet into my rubber boots and grabbed the flashlight. I put on my rubber boots and grabbed the flashlight I'd already put out on the desk. Fuck, I didn't even read it right that time. I put on my rubber boots and grabbed the flashlight I'd put out ready on the desk. I could hear the faint sound of television from the inside living room. From inside the living room. I could hear the faint sound of television from inside the living room. Fortunately, ours was a single-story home. I was able to crawl out of the window. Oh my god, dude, I'm butchering this. Lord, help me now. Please. Okay. Thank you guys. Thank you so much. You guys are a wonderful audience. This is harder than it looks, okay? A lot harder than you think it is. I should just pre-record all of the reading streams. I should just get it out of the way, like 1 month every year. I just act out every book and read it all in like 1 month, and then I publish it slowly. That would be great, dude. It would be perfect if I did that. Sneaking out of the house, I put on my rubber boots. I could hear the television from inside the living room. Fortunately, ours was a single-story home. Wow, that would be amazing. Fortunately, ours was a single-story home. I was able to crawl out of the window in my room without being noticed. I jammed a book in place to stop the window from closing again, and then I was away. It was colder than I had reckoned. I was freezing in my thin sweater and had to beat my arms to get warm. I'd considered staying in bed, but it wouldn't have helped. Otto had sworn that if anyone failed to turn up at Richard's, the others would simply return home and leave whoever it was to do the job alone the following evening. Just the thought of being alone in the churchyard after dark was enough to make me hurry. Running helped against the cold, too. It was only 10 to 11 when I got to Richard's bike shed. Jan Johan and Holy Carl were already there. I think they said they'd meet up at like 11:45. Oh, 11 o'clock. Who would be that early? Anyways. It was 11. I got there at 10 to 11. Thank you, Bloody Clown, for 200 bits and reminding me to mute the alerts. Carl with a K as well. It was only 10 to 11 when I got to Richard's bike shed. Jan Johan and Holy Carl were already there. Before long, Elise showed up too. And only shortly afterward, Richard appeared in the mudroom doorway of his house. Otto arrived on the stroke of 11. "Let's go," he said, as soon as he'd made sure that everything was ready. 2 spades, flashlights, and Holy Carl's trailer. None of us spoke as we crept our way through the streets to the church. The town was silent, too. There was never much going on in the evenings in Terring, and nothing at all late. and nothing at all late on a regular Tuesday. We stuck close to the garden hedges as we walked along Richard Street, turned down the street where Sebastian and Laura lived, ran past the bakery, and ducked down the path behind Ursula Marie's house on Tearing Hovid. Also, I just want to say while I ask for help in pronouncing this word, this is a really good description of what it's like to live in a small town. That, I didn't even realize that the first time I read it, or the second time I read this book. I don't know, that's really good writing for, such a simple, the writing's simple, but it's super good. How do I pronounce Hovidgade? Oh my god. Any Danes in the chat? Just Dan's? Alright, we'll wing it. Ran past the bakery and ducked down the path behind Ursula Marie's house on Tearing Hauser Street and arrived at the churchyard hill, having encountered nothing but 2 amorous cats that Otto chased off with a kick. You always keep it real. It helps me improve, to have a harsher judge. The churchyard hill was steep, and the path between the graves was covered with gravel. We had to leave the trailer at the iron gates. Holy Carl didn't like it much, but Otto promised to beat up on him if he started acting up. The streets had been dimly and rather sinisterly illuminated by the yellow street lamps. The streets had been dimly and rather sinisterly illuminated by the yellow street lamps. Tall fir trees sheltered the churchyard from the street. And although they may well have protected us from any inquisitive gaze, they also screened off the street lighting, which we suddenly found ourselves in want of. There was no more light than came from the new moon and the small hexagonal lamp at the entrance to the church. And of course, the 2 beams are flashlights cut in the dark. Dark, darker, afraid of the dark. I didn't like being in the churchyard to begin with. At this time of night, it was quite beyond endurance. The gravel crunched sharply beneath our feet, however carefully we tiptoed. I kept counting to 100 over and over inside my head. First forward, then backward, then forward again, and so on, and so on. And then once more again. 52, 53. 54. We had to search around in the dark before Elise got her bearings and was able to lead us to her baby brother's grave. 77, 78, 79. And there it was. Emil Jensen, dearly beloved son and brother. January 3rd, 1990. February 21st, 1992. read the inscription on the headstone. The stone was marble and very white and beautiful, with 2 doves on top and red, yellow, and violet flowers placed in front. I almost began to cry and had to look up at the sky and the stars and the new moon and think about what Pierre Anton had said that same morning, that the moon took 28 days to circle the earth, whereas the earth took a year to circle the sun. That made the tears go away, but I didn't dare look at the stone and the doves again. Now Ada sent Elise and Ada sent Elise and me off in separate directions to keep a lookout. He kept the flashlights. The boys would need them to see where they were digging, he said, and we had to find our way between the graves to the end of the church with only the light of the moon, which made everything seem ghost-like and almost blue. Elise stood guard at the rear entrance on the other side of the church, not far from the rectory, but very far from my own position. Talking to each other was obviously out of the question. We didn't even have the comfort of being able to see each other. I tried to concentrate on studying the church. The stone walls were rough and white. There were carvings in the light-colored timber doors. And way high up there were stained glass windows, which at this time of night simply appeared dark. I started counting again. 1, 2, 3. An odd hollow sound came from the grave behind me, every time one of the spades struck the earth. A thud and then a whooshing sound as the soil slid from the spade. Thud, whish, thud, whish. To begin with, the 2 spades worked quickly in succession. Then came a sharp clash. The boys had hit coffin. And now work progressed more slowly. I knew they were edging closer on the casket in order to dig as little as possible. The thought sent shivers down my spine. I shuddered and tried not to think about it again. Instead, I looked across at the fir trees and set out to count them. There were 18 tall ones and 7 smaller ones lining the path from the street up to the church. Their branches waved slightly in a breeze I couldn't feel. But then again, I was standing sheltered behind the wall of the churchyard. I took 2 small steps forward, 1 to the side and 2 back. And again, this time to the other side. And once more, in a little dance made up inside my head. 1, 2, step to the side. 1, 2, back. 1, 2, step to the side. I halted abruptly. I'd heard something. Like gravel being pressed gently underfoot. I stared down the path, but I could see nothing. If only I had the flashlight. There it was again. Crunch. It was coming from the bottom of the path down by the gate. I felt an irresistible urge to pee and was just about to run back over to the boys. But then I remembered what Otto had said and knew he'd cuff me once I came running all of a sudden. I took a deep breath, cupped my hands together, and made a deep hooting sound by blowing air through the crack between my thumbs in the hollow of my palm. I'm just gonna whistle. No, wait, you can't do that. Whoo! Came the faint sound. The gravel crunched again, and I hooted as hard as I could. Hoo, hoo. Otto appeared beside me. "What's wrong?" he whispered. I was so scared I was unable to answer. I just lifted my arm and pointed down the path. "Come on," Otto commanded. And since I was just as scared of not obeying Otto as I was of whatever it was that was making that noise, I followed him off behind the fir trees, where the light was dimmer. We snuck a few steps, and then Otto stopped and looked around. I stood behind him and couldn't see a thing. There was nothing there, and Otto continued on. We moved slowly so as not to make the slightest sound. My heart was pounding, thumping in my ears, and it felt like we were stealing around there, between the trunks of the fir trees for ages. Then Otto pushed aside the branches and stepped out onto the path. "Ha," he scoffed. I peered over his shoulder and felt stupid. It was Cinderella, Sorensen's old dog. After the old man had died, Cinderella had refused to reside anywhere other than on top of her master's grave. The dog had grown inquisitive at the sound of the spades and had shuffled slowly and sedately up the hill on her arthritic old legs. Fortunately, she wasn't one for barking. She just stared at us some and sniffed at my legs. I patted her on the head and returned to my post. Hair break. Everyone fix your hair. Not long after, it was Otto who signaled. They were finished digging. The little coffin had been put out onto the gravel path and looked abandoned, and so awfully sad. But there was no other time to think about that. There was no time to think about that. There was another problem. The boys had shoveled all the earth they'd dug back up into the grave, but the hole was only 3/4 full. A law of physics we had never learned. when a physical body is removed from the ground, the level of earth at the place occupied by the body will diminish relative to the body's volume. Anybody going anywhere near little Emil Jensen's grave couldn't help but notice that little Emil Jensen was no longer occupying it. Now Elise began to cry, and wouldn't stop, no matter how much Otto insisted. We stood a while, without knowing what to do. Then I figured we could roll a couple of headstones from the other graves into the hole and cover them up with earth. The church warden was going to wonder about the missing stones, but he was never going to guess that they were at the bottom of Emil Jensen's grave. All we had to do was make sure we put all the flowers back, as they were before. It took us a good while and a whole lot of toil to get the stones loose and roll them over to little Emil's grave. We left the ones closest by in case anyone noticed the earth had just been dug. But down they went eventually, with a good heap of earth on top. And gravel topmost of all, and then the flowers, which had suffered some underway, but which would just pass after we'd brushed them down a bit with Otto's broom. The town hall clock struck midnight exactly as we finished up and turned towards the coffin. I stiffened, and even in the dark I could see the boys grow pale. The town hall clock had a deep, hollow resonance, and each stroke echoed through the graveyard like some ponderous, ghostly appeal. Come, come, come. None of us moved. I could neither look nor close my eyes, and just stared stiffly at Jan Johann like he was the only image I dared admit to my retina. Come, Gotchigasm. Come, Gotchigasm. Come. Why is this so hard today, dude? Oh my god. That's what she said, obviously. Thank you, JC Mo. I could neither look nor close my eyes and just stared stiffly at Jan Johann like he was the only image I dared admit to my retina. I didn't count the strokes, but it felt like there were many more than 12. After an age, the last one died away, and silence prevailed once more. We looked at one another nervously. Then Jan Johann cleared his throat and pointed at the coffin. "Let's get out of here," he said. I noted his subtle avoidance of the word coffin. Thank you. The coffin must have been very fine and white when Elise's baby brother had been put into it. Now the white finish was blistered and cracked, and no longer fine at all. There was a worm crawling in some earth at one of the corners. and holy Carl refused to carry until Otto had brushed it away. Then they bore the coffin, the four of them. Otto and holy Carl at one side, Richard and Jan Johann at another. At the other. Elise, who had stopped crying when the town hall clock had struck. Elise, who had stopped crying when the town hall clock had struck, walked ahead and lit the way with her flashlight, while I brought up the rear with mine. The coffin was heavier than they'd imagined, and the boys were panting and sweating. But Otto wouldn't let them rest until we'd gotten all the way down the street. All the way down to the street. It was no loss to me. I could see no reason to hang out in the churchyard more than was absolutely necessary. Behind me, there was the crunching of gravel. Sorensen's Cinderella plodded slowly along after us, as if she were the mourner in the procession. To begin with, it was comforting and kind of made us feel braver. But when we got down to the street and the coffin had been handled into place on the trailer, we were somewhat unnerved to see her still following on behind. It wouldn't do for the church warden to discover the next morning that not only was he missing 2 gravestones, but Cinderella was gone too. There was nothing we could do about it, though. No sooner had one of us taken her back to the churchyard than she turned around and followed us again. After we had tried to shake her off 4 times, we gave up and decided she could come along until she turned back herself. Which she didn't. When we arrived at the sawmill, turned the code on the padlock, and opened up, Cinderella slipped in ahead of us. I turned on the lights, and the boys stepped in with the coffin between them. In the bright neon light, it didn't seem so scary anymore. It's just a dead child with some wood around it, I thought to myself, as I considered more closely the coffin that had now been placed at the foot of the heap. Blah, blah, blah. I can't read. God damn it. I'm sure this is helping. Some long sentences. Blah, blah, blah. I turned on the lights. In the bright neon light, it didn't seem so scary anymore. It's just a dead child with some wood around it, I thought to myself as I considered more closely the coffin that had now been placed at the foot of the heap of meaning, it being too heavy to be put on top. We were too tired to worry anymore about Cinderella, so we just let her be, turned off the lights, locked up, and scuttled away, back through the town. Reaching the end of my street, I said goodnight to the others and hurried off, rather more at ease than I had been setting out. The book was still jammed in the window, and I climbed inside and into bed without waking anyone in the house. I have to pee so bad. Thank you, everybody.